All right, joining me now here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is Alexis Goldstein. Alexis is a activist, a writer, a teacher. Her work has been seen in The Nation, The Washington Post, American Prospect. She is the communications director for The Other 98%, all of which and more you can find at alexisgo.com. You can also follow her on Twitter at Alexis Goldstein. Alexis, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, so Alexis, people who are familiar with you know that before your activism with the Occupy Wall Street movement, you actually worked on Wall Street.
Right.
So you actually have firsthand knowledge of some of the horrors that go on there. Let's begin by talking about the proposed settlement between JP Morgan Chase and the government. Describe for us, to start out, what exactly is JP Morgan accused of doing?
Sure. So this has to do with the financial crisis, and in particular, it has to do with a special kind of product that was being pushed really aggressively during the lead up to the financial crisis. It's something called a mortgage-backed security. But the way that I always think of that is it's basically like if you take thousands of mortgages and then you put them in this giant box and then you sell off chunks of that box to investors. So it's not, you can't really buy and sell a single mortgage. And so Wall Street is always eager to turn things that are not tradable into tradable products. And so they basically created this thing called the mortgage-backed security so they could bet on mortgages. And so what JP Morgan Chase is accused of doing is basically lying about the quality of this product that they were selling to a whole bunch of people. They were basically misrepresenting it as really safe and really high quality, and it basically was, a pile of crap.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were sued by a number of investors, but what this settlement is specifically about is basically the mashing together of both open investigations and two lawsuits. One lawsuit is from the Federal Housing and Finance Agency, which is the regulator for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And there was also a lawsuit by the New York Attorney General's office. But both lawsuits basically said the same thing. And all the open investigations in this settlement said the same thing, which is basically that JP Morgan told us that this steaming pile of crap was amazing and that we should buy it. And they committed fraud and they lied to us about what it was that we were purchasing.
And so through these lawsuits, there's the settlement that's trying to take place is for $13 billion. And so a lot of people are saying, wow, this is the biggest settlement in history. Wow, isn't this wonderful that this is happening?
Right.
But when you actually look at it, it's actually not that good of a deal when you look at what JP Morgan actually made off of all these crimes.
Right. So just to pluck one lawsuit out of this, the one that the New York Attorney General filed, they basically said that investors lost $22.5 billion. And so if you just look at that one lawsuit, the proposed settlement is for a little more than half of just what the investors in the New York Attorney General's case lost. And that's not taking into account everything else that this settlement is mashing up together.
So it's still sort of shocking. So I guess another angle of this that people are also looking into is, even if the settlement actually goes through, it's sort of up in the air whether or not most people, like I know you because you were down at Occupy Wall Street all the time. Most people actually want to see some of these executives who did these crimes actually go to jail. Will this settlement, as we know of it right now, preclude that? I mean, nothing's happened yet. Describe how that actually would work.
So the good news is, and again, everything we're talking about for the most part is speculation. It's reporting. It's people leaking things. We did see on Friday that the Federal Housing and Finance Agency, the Fannie and Freddie regulator, actually did come to a settlement of $5 billion. So at least part of these stories are true. So we have reason to believe that the other things that have been reported about this settlement are true. But what has been reported is that this does not prevent future criminal charges, which is a very good thing, because normally the way these settlements work is they pay a bunch of money and then they are immunized from future criminal charges. So if you just compare it to past settlements, it's moving in the right direction, but there's still nothing being talked about in the way of criminal charges. And so it's still not what I would want, what I think a lot of other people would want. And it's still not moving towards what I think is the only thing that's going to truly change behavior on Wall Street, which is a perp walk, which is someone in jail. Because if it's just fines that you're talking about, it's really easy to just do the formula. Is the cost of a potential future fine going to be less than the profit I am going to make from committing a crime? And the answer to that question is usually yes, it's cheaper. The fine is cheaper than the profits I will make potentially committing this crime. And so we're moving in the right direction, but until we actually see true criminal charges and a perp walk, and I don't see any signs pointing to that, right now, apart from the fact that there is a U.S. attorney out in Sacramento who is pursuing a criminal case against J.P. Morgan. I'm just like not holding my breath. But,
Right.
Credit where credit is due. The fact that they are not signing away the possibility of this is worth, I suppose, praising mildly.
Or at least a little bit of side eye praise,
Right.
because they really could have and should have done the prosecutions already.
Right.
And but again, I guess it's sort of like a lot of people are wondering is how the actual settlement will ultimately be worded. Will there actually be an admission of guilt in the settlement, and how that's actually phrased? Because if it's phrased a certain way, that really should actually really open the door to prosecutions. But you sort of, I don't know, I guess I just don't have the confidence that the wording is going to be so that it's going to just be like, oh, here's the admission of guilt. Let's get the cops down to J.P. Morgan's offices and arrest Jamie Dimon, I guess.
Yeah, and I think and by they I mean J.P. Morgan Chase and Jamie Dimon have been particularly egregious and relentless in a whole bunch of different areas. So Jamie Dimon is kind of notorious for being like seen as the king of Wall Street, the most important man in American capitalism and whatever. And people think he's so awesome. And it doesn't seem to matter the amount of crimes that he commits. People still think he was great because he weathered the crisis. But like the fact is, they still got billions of dollars in assistance through secret Federal Reserve liquidity lifelines. They were the AIG bailout in a lot of sense passed through to them because they had bought insurance from AIG. So they got a huge amount of government assistance, but he still has this reputation that nobody really questions him on. And they have been vociferously lobbying against financial reform. And so I feel like regardless of what they may or may not say in the settlement, like this is a guy who's basically a sociopath and has a really short memory and will, doesn't mince words, but also will like manipulate the story to whatever degree that benefits him. And like for the most part, the media will just be like, yay, Jamie Dimon, we totally agree with you. You're so awesome. And so I think, you raise a really good point. I just feel like no matter what is in there, like Jamie Dimon will spin it somehow to make him look awesome, even though he's like should be in jail.